radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. Thank you for joining us. Today is February 7th, 2017. I can't believe we're going by so fast here. This morning we have a returning guest, a friend of our show, Donna Gilmore from SanOnofreeSafety.org. I really appreciate your time, Donna. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Happy to do this.
Well, I am glad. So let me just give it to you. Is there anything in particular you'd like our listeners to know about, or something that we can do to actually help get involved and save our planet on this issue of nuclear stuff?
Yes, I want to tell you about, number one, I want to tell you about a House bill being proposed. It's a Darrell Issa Conaway bill. It's the HR 474. That's 474. It's called the Interim Consolidated Storage Act of 2017.
Wow.
Now, to a lot of people, what this is proposing to do is basically, in essence, create a couple of private storage facilities so that everybody that has, starting with decommissioned plants, to send their waste containers, waste canisters. It appears to be Texas or New Mexico. Okay, so people that have waste in their state are probably saying, oh, goody, let's get it out of here. The problem with this bill is it's revising the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, okay? And what the Nuclear Waste Policy Act has in it right now, basically, if you're going to store nuclear waste, in this situation in dry storage containers, then you need to be able to monitor and retrieve the fuel and maintain it. I mean, it sounds like common sense. Sorry about that. This Interim Consolidated Storage Act, the HR 474, would basically wipe out any requirement to make sure the waste can be monitored and retrieved in case there's a problem. So it needs to go in a different container. I mean, this stuff, we're talking, last centuries, and they don't even have a way to monitor it right now at the nuclear plants properly. And so the plan is, and so right now it would be illegal to move this waste to, say, Texas or New Mexico or anywhere, and be in compliance with the Nuclear Waste Policy Act that requires that it be monitored and retrievable storage. But if you read H.R. 474, and I doubt if anybody that's planning to vote for this knows that it's deleting those requirements. So it's important to contact. Wow. It's important to contact your, I would do local, state, and federal, all three. Because sometimes if you go through your local, like your local city councils, whatever, you can have them write letters to or contact their representatives and make them aware of this problem. If you read the House Bill 474, it won't say anything about what they're deleting. Okay, it just says this act replaces, that part of the nuclear. So they're kind of hiding this information.
Well, the way it's written, I just pulled it up and I looked at the text. The summary is not available. So it does not in any way say what it's replacing. It just says to include these things. You're right. If you don't know what the original act said, then you don't understand what they're fixing.
Exactly. And nobody's reading that. I know this. And I actually met ISA. Daryl Issa is the sponsor of this bill, and I met with one of his key staff people not too long ago. And I said, if we're storing nuclear waste in dry storage containers, does Daryl Issa believe that waste should be stored in a way that can be safely monitored, inspected, and maintained to avoid a radiation leak? And his staff person said, well, of course, that's just common sense.
Huh.
And then I said, are you aware that the bill that ISA is sponsoring will delete those requirements from the Nuclear Waste Policy Act? And his jaw dropped to the floor, and he said he would look into it. But I gave him my card, everything, and guess what? No change. ISA's just pushing on and supporting this bill just as it is.
Wow.
So, which doesn't surprise me, because Daryl Issa was part of the effort to out NRC Commissioner Yasko. Commissioner he was the chairman at the time at the NRC when the Fukushima meltdown happened, and and Yasko didn't want to approve any new reactors until we learned the lessons of Fukushima. And the other four NRC commissioners, who were very, pro-nuclear, profits over safety, they didn't like that. I mean, Yasko only had one vote, so he didn't get his way. But the other four wrote a letter to President Obama with some trumped-up charges on why Yasko should be removed. Daryl Issa released that private letter to the media.
Wow.
So he's been a long-standing, pro-nuclear activist, and now he's claiming, oh, well, we can't leave the waste here at San Onofre, long term, we've got earthquakes and millions of people lived here. Well, that's just his PR, because, we've always had those risks here. And before he promoted this bill, he was all for keeping it open. It's totally safe. The waste is safe. Everything's hunky-dory. So the real agenda of this bill is to remove liability from the utilities for this waste they've created. And they know this waste. They've been putting this waste in thin canisters, thin stainless steel canisters. Most of them are a half-inch thick, that they know can crack from environmental conditions. The NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission staff, said a similar container, it wasn't holding nuclear waste, but it was a comparable container, leaked in only 17 years, and it was thicker than the majority of our half-inch canisters.
Wow.
The cracks were deeper than the thickness of our canisters. And I met with John Kotek of the Department of Energy, and I met with his one of his chief deputy. John Kotek reported directly to Secretary Moniz, who ran the Department of Energy. And then John Kotek had his a nuclear engineer deputy with him at this meeting, and neither one knew about the problems of these thin wall canisters that the NRC has been rubber stamping and approving. They did not know. And then I met with former NRC Chairman McFarland, and she was in her agency was responsible. Her staff was responsible for approving these containers, and she's done reports on nuclear waste, spent nuclear fuel they call it, and she did not know these canisters couldn't even be inspected on the outside. She had no idea, But once I explained it to her, then the light bulb went off in her head, and she says, "Oh, I see why it would be impossible to inspect those." So what I've learned is that people, the decision makers, are not being given the facts. And I had communicated in writing with the Department of Energy, and I communicated in writing with Chairman McFarland, but it wasn't effective doing it in writing. They just assumed that I must be wrong, because who in their right mind would build canisters that can't even be inspected on the outside, let alone the inside? They're welded shut. So what I see is it's going to take some one-on-one meetings with decision makers. In this case, we're talking about the Trump administration. I do not. I'm sure that President Trump and his family has no idea about how waste is stored, and I'm sure the senators that are going to vote on this House bill, I'm sure they have no idea that it's removing basic requirements that you didn't expect in a car, to be able to inspect it and maintain it and have some warning before something fails. So the nuclear industry is doing a good job of hiding facts, and it's up to us to bring awareness of this to our elected officials and others, and share the information, and because we need to have pressure, and it has to get up to the highest levels to stop this. The person that's in charge at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the director of spent fuel management at the NRC, Mark Lombard, he has been trying to hide the facts from his bosses and from everyone, really. He tried to mislead our California Coastal Commission. He came here for a meeting because Southern California Edison wants to put 100 more of these thin wall canisters right by the beach here. And he tried to get away with not saying that there were any issues with inspecting these things. And I had worked with the Coastal Commission staff, and so they had put it in their report that these things can't be inspected, and also that if they have any cracks in it, they can't be transported, which is another issue, even partial cracks. And one of the commissioners, really grilled him until he tried to give her some bureaucratic BS and avoid answering her question when she asked can these things even be inspected. And he finally, after she wouldn't let go, he finally admitted, and his words were, "It's not a now thing." And
it's not a now thing. So why do you think that Mark Lombard's supposedly a public servant, right? He works for the NRC, which is our public servant. So why would he intentionally misrepresent some of this information?
Well, here's how things really work, and I've learned this in my travels of dealing with all levels of government and the nuclear industry, and speaking to the heads of these vendors that make the products and various other things. And what I've learned is, the president appoints the 5 NRC commissioners. They're the ones that make the decision at the highest level. That's what's going to happen. And the president gets to appoint these 5 commissioners, but they have to be confirmed by the Senate. And the Senate that we have had has been, super friendly to the nuclear industry. All right. And Obama, he'd be lucky if he could get one good one that cared more about safety over profits to get them confirmed. So, the president's not a dictator. And so as long as
sorry to laugh about that.
Well, Trump will find out he's not a dictator. We'll see what happens. But I actually am a little optimistic that if Trump or his family were truly aware of what's going on with these waste containers. These containers are located, close enough to where he lives, close enough to Manhattan, which he loves, and his Mar-a-Lago in Florida. The East Coast is, in particular, we have some on the West Coast too, but the East Coast in particular, and then you've got places like Chicago or Illinois that have more waste than any other state. And the winds blow, towards where Trump lives. So, and there's no fence in the sky that's going to stop this radiation from going to the east. If he really knew how much he's personally at risk, he and his family are personally at risk, and that they've got no monitoring system to prevent a leak, and that these canisters that they're using in the United States, most other countries aren't crazy enough to use thin wall canisters. Theirs are 10 to 20 inch thick walls and have remote monitoring to prevent leaks. If he had any idea what's really going on, I'm sure that he would do the right thing, so that's the challenge, is being able to get access to educate him on the facts. And, I have all the proof that's needed. NRC documents that prove this case. So there's no question.
Do you think that Darrell Issa knows? Do you think that Darrell Issa himself knows?
I told his, I think it was his chief of staff at the local office. I told him, he wrote it down. When I'm giving this information and then there's no contact back there, in my opinion, based on living in Southern California with him as our so-called representative, given his history, I have no hope that he's going to do the right thing on this, So, he isn't even, people.
He's just a mouthpiece for Southern. You think he's just a mouthpiece for Southern California Edison? He's just doing what they ask him to do?
No, he's a mouthpiece for the entire nuclear industry. Wow. It's not just a California issue. When he shared that letter with the media to try and get rid of Yasco, this wasn't just about California.
That's true.
San Onofre. This is a national issue. And this bill, this HR 474, this is a national bill. Now, the Department of the New Mexico is one of the places that's, they're trying to start a private storage facility there. And I saw a letter that the governor of New Mexico wrote saying, well, if one of my communities wants to store this waste, I have no objections to that since the waste is safely stored. So she has the assumption that the waste is safely stored. So to say New Mexico has consented, they're consenting on a lie at the governor level, So again, the people don't know the truth about this stuff. And there's a whole lot of people in New Mexico and Texas that are strongly opposed to this. You've got a huge aquifer And so if any of that leaks into the ground, you're going to be affecting, multiple states' water supply for agriculture and for people's drinking water. So, and these containers are not designed for even short-term storage, And if the canisters have any cracks in them, even partial cracks, which they don't even know they have cracks because they can't see cracks in the kind of containers they're using, they're not safe to transport. And the NRC regulations say you can't transport them, but the NRC has pretty much been a rubber stamp for the nuclear industry, so they'll probably give them an exemption. But you don't want to. These have to go by rail, by the way. They're so big. So
wow.
We also have a video of the Holtec president, Dr. Chris Singh, the president of Holtec. He's one of the major player vendors that sell these inferior canisters, and we have him on video saying he was at a Edison public meeting. He says, even if you could find a crack, even if you could find it, even a microscopic through-wall crack will release millions of curies of radiation into the environment.
Wow.
And even if you could find a way to repair the crack, it's not feasible because that repair would introduce another area for another crack to start. So, we even have that. And when I brought that up to Tom Palmisano, who is in charge of San Onofre, I said, well, look, you're buying containers from Holtec, and the president says this. And his response was, well, I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with Dr. Singh. That's the best he could come up with, is just disagreeing that what Dr. Singh said was true. And I said, well, can you provide me data to support your opinion here? And yeah, I'll get back to you, which is basically code word for I'll never hear from him again on that issue. He can't get back to me. He's got no proof. He's got no data to make that claim. So,
Donna, how do you cope with this idea with these elected officials that you're in contact with? I have two questions to ask you. First, because when we're talking, we're encouraging people to connect with our elected officials. How do we emotionally deal with the idea that we're basically being told, we don't care about your safety, we don't care about the safety of the planet, all we care about is money? How do we frame that in our heads and want to keep going? For me, it's beyond, they do it so that we will stop calling them.
Who are you talking about now?
I'm talking about when we call our elected officials, we don't really get feedback. When you call your elected officials, they basically say.
That's why I say, well, if you, it depends on who your elected official is. Well, we had Barbara Boxer, and she was great. Unfortunately,
right.
She's gone. So,
right.
But it's better to do it, to go local, because I realized that I was at just let me give you an example. I was at a NRC public meeting, and we all got up there and made our 3-minute comments. And the mayor of San Clemente, Lori Donchek, she got up there and she made her public 3-minute comments. The only comments that made it into the paper was the mayor's comment. She represents an entire city. What she says counts more than everybody else just standing up there. So you really, and then we got our city councils and county supervisors to write letters to these federal elected officials representing their entire community, and okay. saying, make sure any container that stores this waste is, until we can get it out of here, make sure any container can be inspected, maintained, and monitored to avoid leaks, and you also need to retain the pools. Even after when they take the fuel out of the reactor, it goes in these looks like swimming pools full of waste. These are spent fuel rods, and they go down underwater, and they have to cool for a number of years, anywhere from normally 5 to could be up to 25 years, depending on how long they burned it in the reactor. And then it goes out of the pools into dry storage containers. Well, what the NRC is allowing decommissioned plants to do is after they empty the pools, they're allowing them to destroy the pools. Well, guess what? The pools are your only recourse. If something goes wrong with one or more of those canisters, or I should say when something goes wrong, the only recourse they have is to stick it back underwater in the pool. But if the pool is gone, they've got nothing. And the NRC had, so basically the action item is, basically you don't want to support that House bill because of the flaws I mentioned, but you want to say any container the waste is in needs to meet these basic requirements, inspectable, maintainable. On San Onofre safety, I have a cities section, and in there is a sample resolution, a sample one that was actually passed, a draft resolution, in other information and handouts that can be used by anyone, as a starting point. You can customize it to your area, and if somebody has, questions or, I'm available for that, they can contact me through the website. But the timing is critical right now. I also have on the home page of San Onofre Safety, if you have an inventory area, and it's a handout that lists all the places where these dry storage containers are, how many you have, when they were first loaded with fuel, and what manufacturer made them. So that's another useful tool. It's Department of Energy inventory data. It goes through June 2013, but it has all the historical things. So there's plenty of tools on there. The San Onofre Safety is kind of a self-service website for activists, for media. I mean, the media actually uses it because everything is referenced. There's nothing on San Onofre Safety that doesn't have a reference to a scientific or a government document. It's it's not an opinion website. It's substantiated facts. And I have the video of Dr. Singh. I have the video of the NRC Director Mark Lombard, admitting, the problems with these canisters. It's getting the word to the right people, but people can start at their city council level. And it doesn't have to be their city. Some cities we use this method to help get a San Onofre shut down, or have them not restart a broken reactor, basically. And you don't have to just go to your city. If you've got a city that's a lost cause, and I think people know if they've got one of those cities, go to another city. Find somebody that lives in that city, meet with, the city council person that you think would be the best one to discuss this with, and get them to introduce this, work with them on, that, and get a resolution drafted, working with them. And then, then you can speak. But just don't go in public comment and say this. You really need to kind of grease it ahead of time and get one or more of the city council people educated ahead of time. By the time, and this applies to any meeting. If you're trying to go to a meeting where they're going to make a decision, by the time you walk into that room, normally it's already a done deal. So you really need to talk to people ahead of time and get to the people that have who has the authority to really, make the decision. And if they're appointed people, then whoever appoints them is probably really running the show on big items. So
Donna,
those are just some things that help make you more effective.
Were you actively engaged in contacting your elected officials and doing all these things prior to your engagement with this? I mean, is this a habit that you've had your entire adult life, or is this new habit of being engaged to affect legislation? Is this new? I mean, because the reason I'm asking you is because I think your suggestion that we engage at a local level, our elected officials, that we meet, we ask to go in and sit and actually talk to our congressmen and be reasonable with how the process of government works. Like, we can't just call up and demand answers right now. It's a process that if you wait until the legislation hits the floor, it's a bit too late, right? So have you always been actively engaged publicly like this?
No, but I not in an activist role, but I've worked in state government, and so I know how things work from the inside. Because
Right,
I've been on the inside of it, so
right.
I know what works and what doesn't. Now, if you've got sometimes if you've got a governor that for issues that you can deal with at the state, if you've got a governor that is already been bought or heavily influenced by some other power, then that makes it that makes it more challenging and reduces the odds that you can get anywhere. But I'm hoping with this climate that, well, so just to let you know, when I didn't start getting involved in the nuclear issue until about 6 months before Fukushima, when I found, I read in the local newspaper, the Orange County newspaper, that Southern California Edison was firing employees for reporting safety problems to the NRC.
Wow.
And then I could not believe what I was hearing. I always thought if you're running a nuclear plant, you got the best employees, you're rewarding them for finding and fixing problems. You have redundancy, so if one thing fails, there'll be a backup. I had this perception of what I think most people would consider common sense, and then to find out the opposite was true. They will cut corners for profit, and they just hope for the best. Nothing's gonna go wrong. I mean, I've met enough of these people in the nuclear industry that work in it, and some of those at the NRC, and they know that there's a problem that doesn't currently have a solution. They just hope for the best, that they'll figure it out before it's too late. They're delusional. I compare people that are pro-nuclear energy to, they're in love with nuclear. They're in love with nuclear energy. It's a bad love relationship. If you've ever been in love, or if you've ever been in love with the wrong person, but at the time, your brain would filter out anything that didn't fit what you wanted to believe, or if you have a friend, they're in love with somebody that's going to hurt them or not be good for them, but you can't tell them a thing because, like they say, love is blind. Same thing with the nuclear industry. These people, I've met all levels, and they're just delusional, even when they know some of the things that are wrong. So you have to get outside the love fest and get high enough up to someone that is able to not filter out facts. So that's the key, is to be able to get high enough up. So and then you have so-called experts that they may rely on that are not telling them the truth. So that's a real challenge to get past that. But I mean, all the facts are on the website. They're there for anybody to use. There's all kinds of material. We have the facts on our side, so it's just.
Well, that is actually, I think that our country is suffering right now from that very statement on a grander scale. I personally believe the president is not being told all the facts also. So it goes in through but I think your idea that it really is up to each one of us to get actively and locally involved, like connect with our city council members, have them so that they can go and speak with the full force of, say, 15,000 or however many their constituents are that they represent, instead of just one person, get that elected official.
They're going to, now what the city councils will tell you, oh, well, that nuclear, that's federal jurisdiction. We don't have any jurisdiction. They will initially say that to you. So what you say is, no, but you represent your community. You represent the safety of your community. So as our representative, we want you to write to the federal government, expressing our concerns. So, and that gets you past that initial, reluctance. So,
Right.
and it doesn't matter if you're talking Republican or Democrat, if you're pro-nuclear, anti-nuclear, everyone wants the waste safely stored.
Right.
And we have mainly I live in Orange County, California. The nuclear plant is just across the border in San Diego County. We're mostly a Republican community. So if we can convince Republican mayors and city councils to write to do a resolution, then so don't let it stop you, the fact that if you have a lot of Republicans that you would think wouldn't be open to anything, that I'm sure they have no idea how the waste is stored. Now the challenge is getting them to believe you versus whoever they're listening to. But I had to convince John Kotek and Andrew Griffith at the DOE. I had to convince them that these canisters couldn't even be inspected on the outside, let alone maintained. And I was able to do it. I had all the evidence. And when Andrew Griffith would come back and say, well, one of the things the industry is saying right now is, oh, well, if there's a problem with a canister or leaky canister, we'll just stick it inside another container. I call it an overpack. Okay, like a Russian doll, put one inside the other. Well, number one is the problem with that. They're going to say that because they used to say other things, and then I called them out on that, so now they don't say these other things, and now they're saying put one inside another. Well, I don't know how they even get close to a leaking canister to even do anything with it, but assuming they could get it in another container. These canisters currently are stored in these concrete overpacks or concrete casts, but these concrete overpacks or casts, whatever you want to call them, have air vents in them because these thin canisters are so hot. The fuel is so hot, both thermally and radioactively inside, that they have to cool with convection cooling. And so these big, thick concrete overpacks that look like they're protecting something, they have air vents in them. So now if you've got a leaking canister, you're not going to want to take that thin canister and stick it into another container with no air vents, or the thing is going to overheat. And you can have a critical situation. But most of these people that I deal with, they accept this vendor and industry answer, putting another container without thinking, okay, where's the, and I called Mark Lombard at the NRC, the director, and I said, I cannot find, because you can go on the NRC website and find all the technical specifications for all the containers they have and all that. So I looked for a container that was approved for that purpose of taking a leaking or defective canister and putting it inside some other kind of container. I couldn't find any, so I called Mark, and he must have me on speed dial, I think, too, because anyway, he actually asked me to speak at a couple of their annual waste conferences that they have every year, and I made a presentation at one, but then decided it wasn't worth my time to go to the next two. But anyway, he said that no vendor has requested a container for that purpose. No one has even submitted an application or discussed with Mark this so-called solution they have to take a leaking canister and put it inside another one.
Wow.
So it's all BS. And I did find one of the first reactors that decommissioned. They asked the NRC for permission to get rid of to destroy their pools once they were empty. And the NRC did a thermal analysis to see how long it would take if you take the defective canister or overheating canister or leaking canister and put it in another cask of some sort, metal cask, how long it would take. It'd have to be sealed, remember, how long it would take before that would overheat. And it was, I forget how many, it was just a number of months before it would overheat. And this was very cool fuel compared to what the industry's using now. And so, so when the NRC did a thermal analysis, they said there was a limited period of time it could stay in there, So all indications are that this is just BS that nobody's really, thinking through. They're just accepting what these vendors tell them at face value, or else hoping for the best. So anyway, so you just have to be prepared to probably the case would be to, ask the NRC for, or ask the industry, or have your city say, okay, where's the NRC approval to do this? Where is it?
Wow.
It won't exist, And how are you going to keep the canister from overheating? Right now you use air vents so it cools. What are you going to do if you put it into a container that's sealed, How long is it going to take for that to overheat? These are simple questions if you think about it. You don't have to be a nuclear engineer to this is just a material corrosion issue, It's like plumbing and, So it's, you're not having to understand radionuclides or, any kind of physics or, it's basic stuff. So, people should be able to get comfortable at that level. And you want to stay at a simpler level when you're dealing with city council people anyway. One of the things I found very effective is to let the city council people know in the media and anybody else that'll listen to you, that each one of these canisters holds about as much radiation as was released from Chernobyl, one canister. And we've got about 2,200 of these around the country.
Oh my God. This is what's so overwhelming about it all, Donna, is like they just continue to ignore the elephant in the room, don't they? I mean,
it's because they don't know. We have.
I get what you're saying.
The Department of Energy went around the country trying to get consent for an interim storage facility for this waste. And in the pamphlet they handed out to everybody, it said the waste was safely stored. Okay? So, initially, maybe it was out of ignorance they said that. But after I brought it up and I sent, comments to COTEC, and, they know now, but they didn't correct the pamphlet. Of course, John COTEC no longer works for the NRC. He decided to take a job with the NEI, which is the Nuclear Lobby Organization. So you can see where that went.
This is so stunning. I mean, it's a little bit of a dry topic, but when we really understand the implications of what it's going to mean and the gravity of our elected officials not comprehending this very serious situation, for me, it's an imperative, at least for myself on a personal level, for me to get to know my city council. We just had a new election. We have new city council members, a new mayor. I'm actually going to make a point of making an appointment and getting to know them. And I think this is your advice is we ought to be well heeding your advice to get to know our elected officials.
But just be prepared. Don't
go in with high hopes about it all.
And I've dealt with a lot of executive level people, and they have a relatively short attention span for various reasons. So there's some handouts on the homepage, and there's a handouts page, and there's handouts in the city section. So get some sample ideas.
Go in prepared before you walk in.
Be prepared. You don't go in with opinion. Don't do like fear mongering. Speak to your audience. You can't. A lot of activists just think, well, I'm right, and that's all I should have to say. I shouldn't have to prove anything. It's somebody else's job to prove it. Hey, if you want to lose, go in like that.
Yeah.
Do your homework. You get educated.
Go in and act professional and talk reasonably, and don't get mad if they don't understand you, and don't assume that they're just like lying to you straight to your face, because a lot of them just do not comprehend it. I get that completely.
For former chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission doesn't know this. How can we expect anybody else to know this?
Right. Right.
And it was her job to know this.
Right.
So,
And it was her job to know it, and she really did not know. Alison McFarland
I was face to face with her, and it just took a few minutes. And you know, the rest of the world uses thick walled metal caps, 10 to 20 inches thick. Ours are about ½ inch thick. Okay, 10 to 20 inches thick. And when I was explaining this to her, because at first she said, well, that can't be true, you know, that you can't even inspect the outside. And I said, well, you know, with the thick casts, you can get close to them. And, well, plus they don't have cracking issues. That was another thing with the materials they use. And then as soon as I said, you can get close to the thick ones, I saw the light bulb go off in her head, and she says, oh, that's right. These have to go inside the concrete overpack, and there would be no tools available to inspect when it's in that concrete overpack. Wow. And the light bulb went off. And it just took a few minutes for that, you know.
Well, the interesting part about that after that is that there is so much pressure on her after that this issue has become sort of a non-issue even for, I mean, I don't see her out there actively engaging, even though she's no longer the NRC. She's not the head of the NRC. I mean, this is the thing that kind of leaves me with my mouth open, Donna, is that they can't unknow this information, but they just store it away as, something that we can't do anything about. I want us to move away from that, and that's why I love your website for that reason.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Here's what Mark Lombard will say. He will say, "Oh, they're working on inspection technology. They're working on technology to be able to inspect, and we should have that in a few short years." Okay. So if people want to believe that, I mean, that's where they stop. But I have actually researched inspection technology to inspect stainless steel for cracks, and all the methods to find cracks are not perfect. The one that works the best is to put a fluid dye inside the container and then see, where it runs to see where there might be cracks. Well, they can't do that. Once they fill these containers with the nuclear waste and weld them shut, you can't put, once they're loaded, you can't do that.
Wow.
And there's a lot of problems with so he hasn't explained how it's actually going to work, or I asked one of the technical people. I said, and I asked EPRI, which is a utility lab that the NRC hires to do reports. I asked the Electric Power Research Institute, I think is what EPRI stands for. I asked the presenter. I said, okay, so what percent of a canister do you think you're going to be able to even inspect, or what percent, and very low. So, and can you inspect the bottom? I asked an NRC material engineer, Daryl Dunn. I said, how can you inspect the bottom? Because they're trying to come up with some robot. Well, it doesn't have an answer for this stuff. So it's just smoke and mirrors that if you don't do your homework, they may accept those answers, but and I wish they were right. But and then I asked Mark Lombard when he told me they're working on inspection technology. I said, well, let's just take a leap here and say you find a way to inspect, and let's say you find a crack in the canister. Maybe it hasn't gone all the way through yet, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do next? Can you repair it? What can you do? And his response to me was, well, that's one of the challenges we have here at the NRC. And he laughed.
Wow. Complete disregard. You know, we have about 10 minutes left. I want to get back to this title bill, HR 474, that we started the conversation with, on how important it is for us to get this not to be passed. I'm breezing through these. It's a one-page bill, actually. They haven't really given us a summary. But under section 191, under contracts, the language is just stunning. It says the secretary shall not require a person to settle claims against the United States for a breach of contract entered into under section 302A for the disposal of high-level radioactive waste or spent nuclear fuel as a condition precedent of entering into or modifying a contract under this section, meaning if they do something wrong, no one's required to settle out. Then there's another subsection that asks in paragraph 4, by striking in a monitored retrievable storage site and inserting in an interim consolidated storage facility or monitored retrievable storage site. So they can put our storage waste in an interim consolidated storage facility that's not monitored. And then if something goes wrong, the secretary cannot be compelled to require them to settle any claims. The
whole point. Yeah, no, there's a lot of problems with that bill. Because of our limited time, I only brought up one, but you're catching some of the other things wrong with it.
It's a free for all.
Yeah, the whole point of this bill is to relieve liability of the utilities.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of this. They want those interim sites. So, and in fact, the companies, the private companies that want to build these, they say, well, we're not going to do this unless the federal government takes liability, and the utilities say, we're not going to send our waste to this place unless the federal government takes liability from the point it leaves our facility. So they don't want liability for transport, and they don't want liability for storage of this mess they've created. That's the whole point of that bill, is to offload liability before something goes wrong.
Wow.
So they've created a mess, put profits before safety, and now they want to rush through this garbage legislation that will make it worse and remove all their liability.
It's HR 474. And I really suggest that anybody listening to this that lives in the United States, just type that into Google. Take a look at the legislation. It's not the wording is not that hard to understand. It's easily comprehensible. And frankly, it's incomprehensible that we could get this actually passed. I mean, what if this passes? It's because nobody's paying attention.
There may already be a Senate. Last year there was a Senate version of that bill. It was sponsored by California's Dianne Feinstein and someone else, but Feinstein has not been a friend of safety for the public.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
She's always sides with the nuclear.
Yeah, and I'm sure she's probably ignorant of the facts of the bill, but I have no optimism that she would listen. I actually have a little bit of optimism that maybe some of the Trump family would listen to the truth, because that's what we need. But it can't be, Perry, who you want. I mean, you're going to have to go above the DOE. I mean, if you're putting somebody like Perry in charge, forget it. So
let's hope we can stop Perry. I think that's the whole point, is we need to demand better qualified candidates, because Perry is definitely not qualified to run the DOE.
Well, the thing is, you have to look at where your point of power is and what's I mean, as long as Trump believes the BS that they're putting out, and as long as it's not going to affect him personally or his family personally, where's his motivation to do anything different? You got to give him a reason. You got to give the Senate a reason to not pick him. And to me, this issue, because Perry was heavily involved with one of the companies that currently stores what they call low-level waste, which is still dangerous, but they just named it low-level, so it sounds better. And there's all kinds of stories about Perry. I mean, he got a lot of money from them. So Perry's already, messing with the environment in Texas big time with nuclear and other things.
Well, I think he's been picked to dismantle the Department of Energy. I mean, he is going to just, I think, in fact, all of them, I call him the wrecking ball cabinet. I think that Perry in particular has been picked to basically tear apart the Department of Energy oversight and just let it become a free-for-all for big business. And
Donald Trump was in construction, so he understands construction, okay? And these canisters, it's metal, it's a container, it's construction, it's not nuclear. The container, it's not a nuclear reactor, it's just a friggin' vessel, and it happens to store nuclear waste. So if you're going to have a vessel leak, I mean, it could be plumbing, water heaters. I mean, it's a vessel, all right? So we're talking about the quality of the container and the ability to inspect it before it leaks. That's really what we're talking about. So we would be speaking his language on that score, so there's a plus. And he's in real estate. I mean, you have a major release, you're talking permanent evacuation of Manhattan.
Yeah.
That's something he will care about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually
so
true,
we have
Donna.
to appeal to what he cares about, but do it with credible evidence in an effective way, not like hand him a big stack of papers. It has to be short and sweet in communication. But that, because you can't just tell senators don't vote for you got to give them a reason, and it's a reason that they can relate to. But again, the city council, we need to get the local elected aware of this and have them represent us.
So on your page, there's a drop-down menu that says handouts. So people can go to handouts and print out any of these things and personalize them for their own community.
Yeah, if you go to there's one that's called Cities, and that has handouts in it specifically geared to outreaching to cities. So that
city council handouts and school handouts. Honestly, Donna, your page is magnificent because it's really a great tool for activists in this community who really want to bring awareness to our elected officials of what the real danger is that we have all been we've really all just been misinformed. So the value of your webpage is that you're actually bringing documented evidence to the misperception that we have all just been swallowing. Like myself, up until a few short years ago, I thought nuclear was perfectly safe. So this is why I love your page, because it's very interactive and it offers a lot of people fresh, brand new, free information. So please do go to sanonofresafety.org, SANOFRESAFETY.org. And you know what? I see we're at 8:58 and how many seconds? My goodness, 27 seconds. Thank you for joining us. We have been listening to and discussing HR 474 with Donna Gilmore, who brought that to our attention from sanonofresafety.org. Donna, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate your time. I hope you'll join us again.
Thank you, and I hope people take action, because that's the only thing that's going to save our homes and communities.
Please do. Put your courage feet on, you guys. We'll talk with you tomorrow. Take care.
Bye.